Good afternoon, everyone. So before we start the session, let us chant Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So today we are gathered here together to listen to some Dhamma, the topic being how, in accordance with Buddhism, with what the Buddha has taught, how self is formed, how self is formed. The Dhamma talk has been organized today sponsored by Keshri, Noeline, Mala, Lettuce, and Hemamali, to share merits with their very beloved friend, Ansamali Fernando, Keshri's loving mother, and also Kingsley Fernando. So with all the merits that we collectively cultivate as we listen to this beautiful Dhamma that we always enjoy listening to and learning from, and forming the foundations of life, enabling us to traverse within the path towards Nibbana with all of those merits. Let us share those merits with, of course, Ansamali and Kingsley Fernando, as well as all of our individual relatives of this birth and of past births, whoever in this world as beings would expect merit, would like merit, may they all share in this merit that we cultivate collectively today. So, self. What is self? Now, we have gone over, I think, most of our regular group has sort of gone over the discussion of self in so many different ways. And all that is taught within the Dhamma is to really sort of uncover how this so-called self, this me, myself, and I, how we build it. And understanding self and how self works is absolutely pivotal to this journey of life that we find ourselves in. Although we might not think so, we come to realize that it actually is. Even when we find ourselves in a position that we are unable to forgive a person or unable to really grasp something which is good for our lives, because we rather sort of stick to something which is not. In whatever decisions that we make on the daily, this very moment, with the attitude that we might have at this moment, which is keeping ourselves from enjoying the life that we have, all of this falls under the equation that we have built or formulated within the guidelines and the framework of self. Now, when we speak about self and what the Buddha sort of taught us in terms of what self is and how it works, it is really important to come into an understanding of how our own mind and being works. If we simply take a moment to just close our eyes and go into ourselves for a moment to just reminisce how my mind works. When I come to enjoy something, how does my mind work at that time? How do I interact with a person or an instance at such a time? When I am faced with adversity, how does my mind work? When I'm faced when I have to face or come to face a challenging situation that I have to get over or go over, how do I react? How does my mind, my being react and interact with that scenario? All aspects of that, the being that you are in that very moment, all falls under what we then call self. We sometimes go into saying, when our reactions are so adverse and so out of the ordinary, we say, oh, I don't feel like myself. I feel like it brought out a very bad person, isn't it? We sometimes feel as if a completely different person came out at that moment, prompted by something which was rather extraordinary. But the thing is, what the Buddha teaches us is the fact that when we question the potential of man, the potential of man is only laid down by the roots that man operates by. I'm sorry to just use man, it's rather sexist, isn't it? Excuse me, but I mean humanity. So just a mental note, when I say man, it's humanity. Not being sexist. So the roots that we abide by, the roots that we abide by, and the roots that we abide by, the roots that helps us to function in whatever ways that we do, is divided, as we know, as greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, right? So 6 roots we have. 3 which are good and 3 which are bad. If we simply take a moment for ourselves, for those of you who might have not thought about this, you might find yourselves in a very comfortable position to sort everything that you do, everything from work, from religion, spirituality, daily chores, daily whatever it is that you would do. You can very easily sort all of those out into these 6 baskets. Greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. These are the ways by which we interact with the world. When this interaction happens, we have something which the Buddha relates to as doorways. Doors that connect the external world and the internal. Doors that connect the external world and the internal. Dwara. The dwara can, in Pali, we can also call them the ayatanas or the salayatanas, right? These dwaras, we have 6 of them. The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. 6. So the 6 senses, right? The 6 senses. Everything that we know, everything that we are, everything that we claim to be, are all formations that have taken place due to the data that has been fed, collected, stored through these elements of the 6 doors. Through these elements of the 6 doors. These 6 doors collect data, collects, and they store it up in a way that whenever instigated, that data will be pulled out and it sort of causes a reaction within our minds. The question is then not on the storage of data, but what is the quality of data that has been stored? The question isn't about the storage, but the quality. what is the quality of data that has been stored? Which means in any instance that we come to face, that instance could be taken as something which can maybe motivate you, strengthen you, cultivate, helps you in your cultivation of confidence, or it can be taken in a way that destroys you, weakens your confidence and self-love and self-esteem, isn't it? Or it could also be taken in a way where it neither does any harm nor good. In three specific manners, or in three specific categories, the data can have a specific quality in them. What the Buddha then said is, if the data is being stored within us, if the doors that support this inflow of data is also part, or we have some sort of control over them, why is it that we are collecting data that does not benefit us? That was the question the Buddha asked. Why do we spend time collecting, amassing all of these data in our minds, carrying them with us everywhere we go, if they are not of proper quality that truly supports and helps us in this journey that we call life? That was the question to which the Buddha, as a bodhisattva, started his excavation to find a position of mind where the mind is able to collect the most profound data which can truly bring a sense of all-encompassing happiness, saturating happiness, a sense of happiness that is so profoundly blissful that you would no longer have to search for anything more. Wasn't that the big question the Bodhisattva had? I've had this, I've had that, I've experienced every sensual pleasure there is in the human realm. But what is his need? Why am I not happy? Why is it that people age and die and go through all of these cycles? What is the true meaning of life? Isn't it that in our own journeys of life, whether we are young, whether we are in our mature years, we are all seeking an answer to that same question. We do things that we think will bring us that happiness, that sense of fulfillment, that sense of wholeness. The Buddha in his journey came to realize that journey, that fruit of happiness cannot be sorted out from the external world. He realized that the external world is so vast that we cannot change everything in the external world. And even if we could, we cannot change the nature of this body that I call mine, because it is conditioned by time. It will age, it will decay. The things that I held to as beautiful comes to fade. So what can I hold on to? This the Buddha realized at the time that the Buddha went through his journey of self-mortification, isn't it? He tried to change. He tried to sort of give himself, went through sort of very austeric diets. He changed his whole entire pattern of life from living a princely life to living like an absolute hermit, an austeric hermit. But it didn't do it for him. He then came to realize that Nothing material is really going to bring me that sense of happiness. What is truly going to bring me that sense of happiness is to be found out through internal means. What can I cultivate in this moment within myself, in my mind, through my mind, which will bring me the ability of truly having that sense of contentment with what is right now, with what is right now. What is self? We often say, we use this word, finding myself. It is a word that young people often use. Find myself. I have to find myself. Let me find myself. Don't hinder me finding myself. Let go of me. Right? Young people always say this. I know I've said it myself. Let me find myself. But the thing is, with Dhamma, with contemplation, and also, failed efforts at finding myself in the same way, I've come to realize what is self. There exists no self. In a way that I become what I want to become. I become the data to which I embrace. I become the data that I embrace. The only thing that might hold me back would be other data that might tell me that that doesn't suit me. Again, being data themselves. We have this ability. If we take, for example, the Buddha or the Arahants, the Buddha was not built for enlightenment. If we take the word Buddha away, the Bodhisattva wasn't built. Enlightenment wasn't a part of samsara, this cycle of rebirth and death, isn't it? That is why we say Lokottara Dhamma. Lokottara Dhamma is phenomena that surpasses the world, that is not in the world. This world, the sensual pleasure world, anything within this sensuous world is there to satisfy, to caress the senses. So that is what we essentially do. All our life, what we do is massage and feed ourselves from different sort of senses. We eat, we buy more comfortable chairs and beds. We keep on buying more comfortable chairs and beds. We change houses, we change cars in order that we feel that this is going to bring me more comfort. You might use a certain sort of brand of cream. You find a better brand of cream. You keep on changing the creams. You find everything that you do, it is for the feel of it, isn't it? The feel of it. It smells better. It tastes better. It feels better. It's easy on the eyes. We find ourselves in a world, in a constant cycle where we endeavor to make ourselves feel better and better, hoping that one day I will reach a state of a pinnacle of sorts, a peak, where finally I won't have to go searching for more creams. Where finally I will find the perfect car that I will not have to change. But the thing is, Mercedes-Benz puts out cars every damn year, which is an absolute travesty. It keeps on coming, the gift that keeps on giving, samsara. It makes us feel that we have to do more. Self is then founded within this body, rooted in the senses, formulated by the senses and supported by the senses. Then we come to then self. how does it find a root? We have the experiences, right, that we that comes through the doorways, the 6 doorways. And how does it find a stable ground? The stable ground is found upon this very simple but complex network of thought. What is that? This is me. We simply think, this is me. This is mine. This is I. We see I, if we take the word, this is me, or this is me, myself, and I, take out the this is, and just take I, me, myself, we see me, myself, and I in the cream experience, in the comfort of the car, the seat, the leather seat, the cushion, the comfort of company, the type of company. We apply, we think that this is me. Do you understand? We attribute our identity to that object. Again and again and again and again and again, attributing myself upon that object. Now we find ourselves in what we call a pattern. Because if we are going to consume one type of object, the next object that we might consume is going to be on a similar line, right? On a similar line. So that line that we create, that pattern, that habit that we create, becomes over time what we know to be as me, myself, I, my family, my friends, this my experience, my world. Self is then rooted into all of those parts of you. We think, or we come to believe, that we are what our family does, right? We come to believe that we are within the limits of what type of friends we have. We come to believe that we are as good as the schools or the universities or the degrees that we have, which is not true. But at that moment, it seems to form the entirety of what or how I choose to define myself. You might not be in university, but if you take yourself back to that time, you know what we are talking about. But if we bring ourselves to this very moment, we have identified ourselves with the life experience that we have of this moment. So what do we do? What do we do with this sense of self? What the Buddha says is not essentially rooted in the fact that we should let go or simply live a very, very simple life, but it is rooted upon the fact of not living with delusion. The Buddha has always placed prime importance upon wisdom, prajna. The wisdom attribute, the prajna attribute of our lives enables us to live life in the way that we choose to live our lives, which is the greatest form of freedom that any one of us can have. The greatest form of freedom that any one of us can have. This comes into the question of free will, whether we truly have free will, whether we are truly able to enact free will, whether we truly have a life beyond the kilesas, the hindrances, and all of those other factors of mind that have been conditioned, whether we can go beyond. The thing is, the Buddha in his image itself has proven to us that we can. The mere element, the mere fact that now as a practitioner, most of you who are gathered here today, as practitioners, you have proven to yourself earlier when you came to face adversity and you reacted in a particular manner. And now as a practitioner, where you no longer react in that manner, you have proven to yourself that we are able to go beyond that inherent self that we first or initially identified ourselves by. We keep on proving these facts to ourselves, but the thing is, we do not easily recognize this ability. So then the self is created, or the self is formed, strengthened even more day by day by a person who chooses two pathways to deal with the senses. Two pathways. One is Yon's right attention, and the other is Ion's wrong attention. Your mother, for example, would tell you a million things. Mothers are by nature supposed to be a bit annoying to children. That is the mother-daughter or mother-son or whatever mother relationship. You know, mothers always have to tell you what's right and wrong, even when it is not welcome. So now, speaking from personal experience. So what happens? So even if you're 50 years old, your mother will tell you what's up. So it's not going to change. So we are able to choose whether we would take it in a way that we find it now hindering the relationship, or we are able to take it in a way where it simply is. You're never going to change her. We never do. Like Venerable Asham Brahm says, you know, millions of people listen to my talks and listen to what I have to say and listen to how I say that they should live their lives, and also put in the effort to living their lives that way. The only person in this world that does not listen to me is my mother. Why? Because why should a mother listen to the son? That little brat. That's all he is. That sense of acceptance in a form where it is not delusion, but it is simply in the fact of what is. What keeps us from acceptance is then the ego self, where now the interaction, Sigmund Freud refers to the ego self as the interaction between the outer and the inner world, isn't it? That's one of his definitions that he gives, right? Now, the ego self, when we talk about the ego self, we could easily relate to the ego as his internal dialogue, the way that we sort of decipher things in our minds. How we conclude or come into concluding remarks within our minds with what we are going through or what is going on. This ego that comes into play at this moment, the ego would operate initially on very mundane grounds, right? And it will cling on to anything that it finds, or the thing that it finds most important. And the more that we assume that the object that we have identified as me, myself, and I, what we spoke about earlier, the more that we are engorged by the fact that this is the be-all and the end-all, the more that we find it difficult to forgive, to move on, to surpass our mistakes, shortcomings, our behaviors, isn't it? Right? The more that we are engorged, or the more that we believe that this is the be-all and end-all, that there is nothing more other than this fact that I believe, that is when life truly becomes a living hell. Because why? The world moves on, the world tells you otherwise, but we are stuck. We find ourselves stuck. How many people do we know? I'm sure we all know a few who have had to deal with the loss of a loved one, but is unable to move on. How many people do we know who is unable to deal with aging? How many people do we know who are unable to come into terms with the changes of the body and changes of circumstance? How many parents, people do we know who are unable to deal with their children growing up and coming into terms with their children growing up? We all know someone in one of these categories. Why? Because persons, when they hold on to a certain object in their minds and think that this is it, this is me, this is what I am, people are unable to move beyond it because this is them. That's how they've been living. But the thing is, for us, if we have this Dhamma which teaches us so much more about life, about living, why are we falling into that category? Why are we doing that to ourselves? Why are we not surpassing these petty states of mind to truly live in a state of presence where we are not only able to enjoy one specific thing, but we are now able to truly enjoy and embrace a million things in a way? Where now we do not draw passion and happiness from one thing, but we are able to draw passion and happiness from life itself. The ability and potential that we have been granted by the simple fact of mindfully living. Mindfully living. Where the world has lost its power over us, where the world deems or decides when we are unhappy and when we are happy, when we feel loved and when we do not feel loved. Why does the world have to decide that? Why can't I be the person who decides that? Because at the end of the day, I'm the person who has to pick up the trash. That's what the Buddha was talking about. Why am I giving my power to everything external in this world, to other people, to instances and situations? Why? Why can't I have the power for myself? Why can't I be the person to drive the car that I bought? You can. You can. You can't blame the world for your stupidity. You're the person who's given the car keys to another person. You could have kept the keys for yourself. And that is the path of Dhamma. How you drive your own car and you decide which road you turn onto. That is where we come into now realizing, yes, there is something called self. There is something called ego. This is how self works. This is how ego works. But there is a position in our minds where the consciousness can operate unhindered by both the karma and the hindrances. Do we not know of this position of mind? We do know of this position of mind. Samadhi. Samadhi is a position of mind where we are able to operate at a position of concentration, one-pointedness of mind, where we are truly able to be within the present. And going into Samadhi, just like a person, for example, goes into, let's say, something like a finishing school, right? The more the person goes into this place and learns what they teach, right? You start adopting the values that they teach and the values that they abide by. In the same manner, the more that we go into these states of wholesome, we start picking up on the essence of that wholesome. We might fail, of course, yes, but the more that you go there, the tendency that you have to fail reduces every single time. Every single time. Right? Every single time. It reduces. Why? Because it pulls you away from uncertainty. It pulls you away from restlessness. It pulls you away from any state of mind that is not benefiting to you. And it brings you closer to a state of peace rooted in something which is good and wholesome. Where we finally come to realize that at the end of the day, I didn't need all these tamashas to be happy. Where I finally come to realize that I didn't need the whole world at my fingertips or at the foot of my body for me to truly feel a sense of value and worth and wholeness. This pursuit, the Buddha as the Bodhisattva pursued. He pursued the finest of bliss and pleasure within this world, just like you and I pursue the same at this point within reason, within the resources that is available to us, and day in and day out also plan out what more I can do in the same manner, but far more. Through births, the Buddha pursued and pursued and pursued and pursued. He didn't find it. He didn't find it. And we do not need to live that entirety of life to realize, even through the scope of how connected are we through the internet. We have so much of data to look into the lives of people, and we see the lives of those successful, of those in places that we want to get to, thinking that we will be happy if we were in their place right now, right here. But we are able to look into their lives and find they are still looking for something. So when is it actually going to end, this pursuit? Do we want it to end? Might be another question. Do we want it to end? Am I happy pursuing, having something to do? Because something that we adapt ourselves to becoming is living in a world so fast paced as we do live here in the UK or overseas. You know, this sense of having something to do makes us feel valued, like we feel a sense of worth, isn't it? Right? If we are able to do something and another person commends us for our actions, we feel a sense of worth. But look at that. If I am able to do something and another person is able to validate my action with a response, then I am able to feel happy about it. Oh my God. Oh, sorry. Gosh. Oh my gosh. How weak are we? If all my actions had to be validated for me to feel a sense of worth in my life, where in the world are we as beings? Are we truly living up to the potential of being human, by being the most intelligent beings, as we say, on the planet? Are we truly living up to that potential? Where I am constantly seeking validation to my actions, to feel a sense of worth by doing and doing and doing and doing so much that we at times even forget our own families in the process, or we lose touch of the most important thing, ourselves. This mind, the difficulty that we sometimes face in closing our eyes at night. We have everything, absolutely everything. If you want to get something, go on a vacation, all of that you can do, as long as, of course, you're able to stop working. You're able to do. But we come home, back home at night, and then we take a shower, close our eyes, and then we come to, sometimes if you're not, tired to an extent where you feel so knackered and that you just knock yourself out to sleep in a certain way, we find ourselves in a position where the mind simply does not stop thinking. So many things going on, going on, going on, going on, going on again and again and again and again and again. Oh my God. When is this going to stop? When is this actually going to stop? The thing is, it doesn't. If you don't believe a 27-year-old, ask your old Achiammas. It doesn't stop. It keeps on. We will always find something to busy our minds with, because we find ourselves sometimes in a position where that is the only thing that we know. Keep busy and feel a sense of worth. That is a self that we have identified ourselves with. But the thing is, when a person starts meditating, when a person truly starts to let go, when a person truly starts embracing the present moment, you come to realize a beauty far beyond any sense of happiness that you have ever experienced with anything that you've eaten, with experience far beyond any vacation that you've been on, any piece of clothing that you've put on your body, a sensation so profoundly blissful that you wish, that you hope that you had come to experience it earlier in your life. A profound sensation surpassing every nerve in your body, telling you, my gosh, why didn't I do this earlier? What is this? And it's simply letting go. It simply is a fruit, an experience that you come by simply being able to bring yourself into a position of letting go. And at this moment, if you just think, if you just close your eyes for a moment and just think, everything that you're fighting with at this moment, let it be, something with work or some situation at home, with your child, with some distant relative, with friends, whatever it is. Something, anything, something that is bugging you, something that you're thinking, or maybe it's Sri Lanka, of course. And just imagine, like peeling an onion back, the layers of an onion back. If you are able to just let go of that, the friend, the bugging person, the person who bugs you over the phone all the time, or the situation at home, you're able to sort of not have that bothering you, the situation at work, if you're not able to have that, if you're not able to, peeling all of that back, all of those layers, feeling lighter as you just let go, just drop. I think I'm enjoying this a bit too much. Might not be able to go through the talk. But just imagine that even this mere imagination of a position, the imagination of a position where we can bring ourselves to even imagine that that is not there, that you're not bugged by it, annoyed by it, that it doesn't cause any disruption in your life. Whew, I feel calm already. That is what we are talking about. The fact that all of this suffering that we think that we have to go through, you don't have to go through. All of these things, even the Buddha, we have very, very drastic examples with the Buddha. And we, with, for example, self-sacrifice, we know donation of limbs and all of these things. We have very drastic examples. That is a different level of practice, of course. But even to find ourselves in a position where we come into the mere reflection and realization through reflection that I am simply not the person who I think I am. I am simply stronger. I am simply able to deal with difficulties without having to carry the stress of dealing with those difficulties around with me. Some people think it is absolutely impossible, but we have practitioners who've dealt with so much, from family issues to abusive partners to terminal illness to death, till death. We have met people, practitioners, I have, who have been able to maintain a beautiful state of mind up until the very end, to persevere, to radically accept, to simply not fight with what simply is, but through acceptance, radical acceptance, to truly bring out the best self that you possibly can be. The only hindrance that we find is simply self itself, where we imagine that we have to be this specific way. So food for thought. Because if we, as people living in this part of the 21st century, if we know anything at all, with all the data that we find ourselves immersed in, everything within the tips of your fingers, if you know anything, is the fact that we really can't depend on the outside world for our happiness, isn't it? Just these past 2.5 years, how much have we been through as people? From COVID to sort of cold winters where we did not think we would make it out, in a way, with loneliness, with the financial crisis, with all of these things, with the Ukrainian war and war all across the world, with racism, with nepotisms, with all of these experiences, it never stops. Just as, I'm just saying the bad, but, the good is also there, but even if you take the good, you see, for example, if you take a young life, and we find ourselves, Friday night, you're in university, or, you're going through school, and then you find yourself Friday night, by Thursday, you're planning which club we ought to go to, right? Where we would have pre-drinks and then dinner, or drinks, pre-drinks, and then the club. And then sort of you find yourself waking up, partying up until Saturday morning, coming back home, people doing this all over again and again and again, every weekend. Oh my God, every weekend, still continuing, hold on, every weekend. Again and again and again and again and again and again. Oh my God. And we find that cycle, yes, okay, that is kids, those are kids. But then again, with the adult, it's a different story, right? We all have those stories that again and again and again and again and again. And we find ourselves in a position where, of course, we have to live, but we do not have to be deluded that our work is our life. What truly brings, if we ever imagine that, yes, of course, money makes us happy. But the thing is, are people who are then not above a certain class of wealth not happy? Do we need all of this to be happy? So then what do we need to be happy? A wholesome mind. So whilst we pay so much of attention to the environments that we are in, let us bring ourselves into what the Buddha taught, time to time, to remind ourselves, look, what am I doing for myself? What am I truly doing for myself? Am I empowering the mind? Do I have the ability to keep my mind in focus upon one object and be right there? Am I able to be at home all alone when it's pin drop silent at home, just with myself? Am I able to truly just be in the present? To be happy with simply myself? Because although we might be surrounded by people all our lives, remember that we are born into this world alone, and we will very well die alone. Two most important journeys. Of course, birth, we are not very aware because we are young, our faculties are not that strong. But death is, we are somewhat or rather aware. And it can be a hollowing experience if we are not able to truly embrace that moment for what it is at that moment. You know, if my life is all to do with the people who are around me, was all to do with everything that I had, with the identity that I flourished in. So what happens when that ID is taken away from you? How am I going to make that journey? And I am a firm believer in living well and dying well. Living with wholesome and also dying with wholesome. So I'm going to leave you with that for today. Okay. So with all the merits that we have accrued today, I guess a lot of people, it is a very බොහොම තීර්ණාත්මක වෙලාවක තමයි අපි ධර්ම දේශනා දහන්නේ නේද? So a lot of people, their minds, although we are here at the Dhamma talk, our minds might be elsewhere, you know, minds might be elsewhere because, you know, as Sri Lankans, it is a very decisive time in our country. So whilst we share merits with Keshari's beloved mother and father, Ansumali Fernando and Kingsley Fernando, and also the friends have all come together to remember their friends and offer this Dhammadana to everyone. So whilst we perform this meritorious act of instilling a part of beautiful Dhamma, all passionately really spoken true passion and true delight in the Dhamma, really, I would also like to share all these merits with all those people suffering all across the world. And of course, we must especially remember Sri Lankans, the fear, the trauma, the insecurity, the instability, all of these things. And as Sri Lankans, I guess, you know, although we live so far away from Sri Lanka, maybe we don't even go to Sri Lanka anymore, maybe just every 2 years or 1 year or whatever, but we find ourselves connected in a certain way. We find ourselves connected in a certain way. And we know how beautiful the country is. We know how you know, in a way, the potential the country has. And it is so hollowing to see what is going on. So sharing all of these collectively, all our positive thoughts and vibrations and thoughts of loving kindness and all the merits that we accrue, of course, at this session, but as a group, as a community, we meet 5 times a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, 5 times a week. And we do so much together. This little group that we have, we do so much together. All of those merits that we cultivate, let us share with all those beings, especially Ansumali and Kingsley Fernando, as well as all those beings all across the world, even with Ukraine or the Middle East or Sri Lanka, everywhere. This is the plight that greed brings to the life of people, if we cannot understand the extent of the dangers of unwholesome within the examples that we have today, how else are we able to truly see Dhamma? This is the extent of greed, the extent of living a life of greed and greed for power and money and all of that. Let us wish all those beings strength, all those beings a strength to persevere and find happiness in their lives and fight for what they believe is true and right, but not only something which is short term, but put in the effort necessary to make the changes necessary in their lives, their environments, and their own countries. So while saying so, let us together chant Idam me nyati nang hotu, Sukita huntu nyateo, thinking of Ansmari Fernando, Kingsley Fernando, and all of our relatives of this birth and the past births, our mothers, our fathers, who we can't even remember of the past births. May they all share in the merits, and may this merit help them to travel from darkness to states of light, from light to even more graceful states of light, and may they find comfort within the company of Kalyana Mitras. May they find comfort wherever they might be. Idam me nyati nang hotu sukita hantu nyateo. Idam me nyati nang hotu sukita hantu nyateo. Edam me nyati nang hotu sukita hantu nyateo. Akasattha cha bummattha deva naga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakhantu sasanam. Akasattha cha bummattha deva naga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakhantu desanam. Akasattha cha bummattha deva naga mahindika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, everyone, have a pleasant rest of the evening, and all the very best. Theron Sannai.
Thank you,
Pero
Bhante.
sa nabandi.
Everyone, Sunday, everyone.
Everyone, Sanay